Welcome to the Lambert House, where secrets hide in every shadow, and the past never lets go. Tonight, we uncover the truth behind the darkness. Are you ready to step inside? I never believed in ghosts. Not really. I thought of them the same way most people do. Campfire stories, creaky floorboards, things your brain cooks up when it's running on too little sleep and too much paranoia. But all of that changed after I stepped inside the Lambert house. It was just after my mother passed when I found the deed in a metal lockbox buried under her bed. I didn't recognize the name on it. Lambert House, 48 North Wintry Drive, Calvert Falls. I'd never heard of Calvert Falls, and when I looked it up, there wasn't much to find. A couple hundred people, some farmland, and a zip code that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. What stood out wasn't just the sudden inheritance, it was that my mom never mentioned this place. Not once in her 68 years. She didn't have any siblings, and my grandparents died before I was born. I thought I knew everything about her life. But there it was. Legal ownership of a two-story Victorian-style home in a town no one seemed to talk about. It didn't feel like a choice. I needed to see it for myself. The drive up was uneventful, but as soon as I crossed into Calvert Falls, something shifted. The clouds hung heavier. The trees leaned over the road like they were trying to keep something in. And the locals? They stared. Not in a friendly, small town, "You're new here" kind of way. It was like they already knew why I'd come, and they didn't approve. I stopped at a gas station near the edge of town to ask for directions. An old man behind the counter with a face like dried leather just blinked at me when I said, "Lambert House." "You're going there?" he muttered. "That place should have stayed boarded up." He didn't say anything else after that. Just turned away and pretended to check prices on a row of motor oil bottles that hadn't moved in a decade. I found the house on my own. It sat behind a warped, iron gate surrounded by tangled hedges and dying oak trees that looked like they hadn't seen sunlight in years. The gate creaked open with a scream that echoed longer than it should have. The driveway was cracked and littered with dry leaves even though there wasn't a breeze in the air. The house itself looked like it had once been beautiful. Blue-painted shutters now flaking to gray, windows clouded with age, the wraparound porch sagging like a tired sigh. One of the second-floor curtains fluttered slightly, even though every window was shut tight. I told myself it was the wind. The front door opened with a stubborn groan. Inside, the air was thick. Not dusty, heavy, like it remembered things it didn't want to share. The foyer led into a long hallway, and every door was closed. The wallpaper was peeling in long, curling strips, and there were spots where it looked like it had been clawed at, not just peeling naturally, but ripped with force. I stepped into the living room. An old upright piano sat in the corner, keys exposed like yellowed teeth. On the wall opposite, it was a framed photo of a family. Mother, father, two sons. I leaned in to look at the names scribbled in the corner. Thomas, Eleanor, Benjamin, and Jacob Lambert. The date said 1911. So this was the Lambert family. But something about the photo unsettled me. The father's eyes were too dark, like the developer had smudged them during the process. The younger boy, Jacob, was smiling, but the expression looked forced, stretched, and unnatural. And the mother's hand on his shoulder? It was blurred, like she'd moved during the exposure, but no one else had. I moved to the next room, what looked like the dining area. The long table was still set. Dust-covered plates, silverware in perfect order, crystal glasses untouched but cracked. It was as though a dinner had been prepared for guests that never came, or guests that never left. I kept going, despite my gut begging me to turn around. In the back of the house, I found the stairs to the basement. The door was padlocked, but the key was already hanging on a hook nearby. That, somehow, was the most disturbing thing so far. Like someone had wanted me to go down there. I didn't. Instead, I climbed the stairs to the second floor. The steps groaned beneath my feet, and halfway up I thought I heard a faint laugh. A child's laugh. I froze. Listened. Nothing. At the top of the stairs were 3 bedrooms. The first was empty except for a rocking chair, which sat pointed directly at the window. The second was a nursery. Toys littered the floor, faded and broken. One of them, a music box, started playing when I stepped in. It wasn't Wound. I swear on my life, it wasn't Wound. The tune was soft, brittle, but eerily cheerful. Ring Around the Rosie. I backed out and shut the door. The music stopped the second the door clicked shut. I finally opened the last door. This bedroom had clearly belonged to someone older. There was a large bed with sheets that looked freshly made. The air smelled of lilacs, too fresh for a house supposedly untouched for years. On the nightstand sat a journal. It was open to the last page, dated October 12, 1958. He comes every night now. Not Thomas. Not anymore. He wears my husband's face but speaks in that awful voice, low and echoing, like it's coming through the walls. The children won't go near him. Jacob cried so hard last night his nose bled. I can't tell if they're afraid of him or what's taken his place. Something is wrong with the house. Something is in the walls. That was when I heard it. A soft knock from inside the bedroom closet. 1 knock. Pause. 2 knocks. Another pause. Then 3 louder. I should have run. I wanted to run, but I was rooted there, breath shallow, heart hammering. I reached for the closet handle and pulled it open, empty. But carved into the back wall, behind the coats and old linens, was a message scratched deep into the wood. Don't let him out. And then I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from downstairs. Heavy steps on old wood, climbing the same staircase I had just ascended. I backed away, heart in my throat, as the sound grew louder, closer. And then the bedroom door creaked open, slowly, like it didn't want to be heard but couldn't resist announcing its presence. My eyes locked on the gap widening between the door and the hallway beyond it. At first, nothing, just empty air and silence. But the footsteps had stopped, and that was worse. Something about silence in a house like this, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like something is holding its breath. I stood frozen by the closet, still staring at the scratched message. Don't let him out, trying to convince myself it was all some elaborate prank, maybe a squatter with a dark sense of humor. But I knew deep down that no one had been here in years. Not since the Lamberts. I stepped forward. The hallway was empty. But now, the light was different. It had been late afternoon when I arrived, but upstairs it looked like dusk had fallen suddenly, too quickly. Shadows clung to the edges of the hallway like they didn't want to let go. And I swear I saw something move just beyond the bend toward the stairs. A flicker. A shape. I couldn't leave. Not yet. Something was pulling me further in. Some awful compulsion that defied every logical instinct. Maybe it was the journal. Maybe it was the fact that this house belonged to my mother, and she never told me why. Maybe it was the fact that I didn't feel alone anymore. I moved down the hallway and stopped outside the nursery again. The door was open now. I hadn't left it that way. Inside, the music box had been placed in the center of the room, its lid open, and something had been drawn on the wall. With what? I didn't want to guess. Stick figures. 4 of them. A tall one, a slightly shorter one, and 2 children. The family. But someone had drawn a 5th. slightly off to the side, larger than the rest, with its head blacked out completely. Beneath it, in the same red substance, were the words, "He's still here." That was the moment the house changed. The floor beneath my feet felt like it shifted, tilted, almost. Like the house was breathing, and I'd stepped into its lungs. I stumbled back into the hallway, and the air grew colder. So cold that my breath came out in a cloud, and the walls seemed to tighten around me. Then I heard it again. The laugh. Childlike, but not innocent. Twisted, mocking. It echoed down the hall from behind a closed door I hadn't noticed before. At the very end of the hallway, just past where the wallpaper peeled in massive sheets and the ceiling sagged, the knob was rusted, the wood darkened and splintered, and there was something wet seeping from under it. I told myself again to leave, to get in the car, drive back to the city, and forget I ever heard of Calvert Falls. But I didn't. I opened the door. A staircase led up, a narrow, steep set of steps, barely more than a ladder, vanishing into darkness. The attic. Of course. The air was choking up there. Dust and rot and something else. Something sweet, like rotting fruit or decayed flowers. I climbed slowly, flashlight in hand, the wood groaning with every step. At the top, the attic was wrong. The space felt much larger than the outside of the house should have allowed. The beams above were lost in shadow. The far corners were invisible, swallowed in thick darkness. My flashlight flickered, just once, but enough to send a jolt through me. And then I saw it. In the center of the attic was a single rocking horse. Old, chipped, one I'm missing. It began to move. Not fast. Just back and forth. Squeak, squeak, squeak. There was no wind. No breeze. It was moving on its own. I stepped closer, flashlight aimed at it, heart thundering. The air around it was noticeably colder, and carved into the base, barely legible through age, were the words, "Jacob's friend." I stepped back. The beam of my light caught something behind the rocking horse. An old toy chest. Its lid was slightly open. Something peeked out from it. A cloth. No, a doll. No again. It was a mask. A black mask. Featureless. With a slit where the mouth should be. My stomach turned. And then I heard breathing. Behind me. I turned fast, heart jumping into my throat. But nothing was there. Just the attic. Empty. But the rocking horse had stopped. The silence was so complete it screamed. Then, from the far end of the attic, came a voice. Low. Scraping. "You opened the door. You weren't supposed to." I couldn't move. Then the flashlight died. Darkness swallowed everything. I stood in pitch black, unable to see, barely able to breathe. My hand shook as I fumbled for my phone to turn on its light. And when I did, the first thing I saw was a face inches from mine. Not a human face. Not anymore. Its skin was pale, almost translucent. Its eyes were too large, too black, too deep, like holes in the world. And its mouth wasn't smiling. It was stretched, torn up both sides, as though someone had carved it wider. And worst of all, it wore the mask. The one from the toy chest. Only now, it had melded with its face, part of it, like it had never come off. I stumbled backward, fell, hit the floor hard. My phone skidded away. I scrambled in the dark, heart in my ears, until my hand found the staircase. I ran. I don't remember descending the stairs. I don't remember how I got back to the hallway. I only remember the sound. It wasn't following me. It was laughing. That same warped, childlike laugh. But now it echoed from every wall. From inside the floors. From behind the paintings. From the air itself. The house was alive. It had been waiting, and now it knew me. I didn't stop until I was outside. I tore through the front hallway, slammed the front door open so hard it bounced off the wall, and stumbled down the warped steps into the dead grass below. The air outside felt wrong too, heavier than before. The trees leaned closer now, their bare limbs twitching like fingers aching to reach out and pull me back. I stood in the yard, panting, staring at the Lambert house like it was a living thing. And in a way, it was. It watched. I could feel it behind the cracked windows, its secrets tucked behind every curtain and in every sliver of shadow that stretched across the peeling walls. The attic window, one I hadn't noticed before, was open now, and there was something standing behind the glass. Motionless, watching me. It wasn't wearing the mask anymore. I backed toward my car, and shaking so hard I dropped the keys twice before managing to jam them into the ignition. The engine turned over reluctantly, as if the car itself didn't want to leave, and when the headlights flared to life, they landed directly on something I had missed when I first arrived. A second path. Just off to the right of the house, hidden by overgrown hedges and a fallen tree limb, a narrow trail disappeared into the woods behind the property. There was a rusted iron arch above it, barely legible through the corrosion. Family plot. I should have driven away. I know that now. But something gnawed at the edges of my mind, an urge, primal and deep. As though now that I had seen it, I had to know what was there. The Lambert house had cracked open some old part of me that wouldn't be satisfied until every piece of its story had been dug up and laid bare. So I left the car running, took the flashlight again, and followed the path. The trail led into thick woods. Dead branches hung low, scraping my shoulders, and the deeper I went, the less I could hear. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of leaves under my boots and the sound of my own breathing. Occasionally, I heard what sounded like whispering. But when I turned to look, nothing was there. Then the path widened, opening into a clearing. At the center was a small, wrought iron fence, twisted in places like something had grabbed and pulled at it from inside. Within the fence were 6 gravestones, tilted and weather-worn, the inscriptions faded but still visible in the flashlight's beam. Thomas Lambert, 1880 to 1959. Eleanor Lambert, 1886 to 1962. Benjamin Lambert, 1907 to 1934. Jacob Lambert, 1910 to 1915, and 2 others, unmarked. Just stone slabs, one smaller than the rest. There were signs of disturbed soil around them, like something or someone had been digging recently. My stomach turned. I approached Jacob's grave. The stone was cracked down the center, and something had been smeared across it, dark, rust-colored, nearly black. It wasn't paint. And then I saw the doll, lying just in front of the stone. Porcelain, shattered face, dressed in clothes that matched the time period. It hadn't been there when I first arrived at the clearing. I was sure of it. I turned back toward the trail and saw the figure again, standing just beyond the tree line, barely visible in the shadows, not moving, not blinking, just waiting. I ran. Branches tore at my arms and face as I shoved my way back through the path. The clearing vanished behind me like it had never existed. When I burst back into the open yard of the Lambert house, my car was still idling, headlights glowing in the dark. But something had changed. The front door was shut again. I hadn't closed it. Against every instinct, I approached the porch once more. The boards groaned under my weight like they remembered me. When I reached the door, I noticed something new etched into the wood, fresh, sharp. "Welcome home." My stomach dropped. That wasn't just a threat. It was a recognition. I was connected to this place. Somehow. And deep down, I felt it. I stepped back inside. The air hit me like a wall, hot, wet, and heavy, like stepping into a forgotten lung. The layout of the house was the same, but it felt different now. Warmer, alive. The hallway stretched longer than it had before. I could see the piano again, keys glinting in the faint light, and next to it, the photograph, the one of the Lambert family. Only now, it had changed. The faces were the same, except for one. A fifth figure had been added to the edge of the frame, faint, like it had always been there, but only recently revealed. Taller than the rest, eyes hidden in shadow. Its hand rested on Jacob's shoulder, and Jacob no longer smiled. I stepped closer, looked harder. The new figure was, impossibly, me. Same hair, same coat, same vacant expression I hadn't realized I wore until just then. I stumbled back, heart racing. A deep, groaning creak echoed through the house, louder than before, as though the walls themselves were shifting. And then I heard it, the basement door opening. Slow, deliberate, something inviting. I turned. At the end of the hallway, the padlocked basement door now stood wide open. The key was gone. So was the lock. And from the darkness below, a new sound drifted up the stairs. It wasn't laughter this time. It was crying. A child's voice. Soft, desperate. "Please don't leave me down here." The voice from the basement didn't sound like an echo. It sounded fresh, like it had just left someone's lips. The kind of crying that stung with loneliness, tangled in despair. But underneath that desperation was something else. Something too precise, too rehearsed. I took one step toward the basement door. The crying stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sobs. Heavy, expectant. It felt like the house was listening. I should have turned and run. But part of me, some part that had already surrendered to the house's pull, wanted to know, needed to know. Maybe it was because I had already seen my face in that photo. Maybe because the whispering hadn't stopped since the attic. Maybe because deep down, I feared this place wasn't just haunted. I feared it was mine. The basement stairs were steep and narrow, choked in darkness. My flashlight was still glitching, flickering every few seconds, casting warped shadows that danced along the cracked plaster walls. The air grew colder with each step down, damp, muffled, like the basement was buried deeper than the earth around it should allow. Then, without warning, the light cut out completely. I froze, let my eyes adjust. The dark didn't feel empty down here. It felt crowded, like dozens of unseen things surrounded me, holding their breath, watching me descend into their domain. I reached the bottom and found my footing on a damp stone floor. The walls were made of crumbling brick, stained black in streaks that trailed from ceiling to floor. There were shelves, rotted and collapsed, filled with broken jars, old children's shoes, and tiny porcelain heads detached from their dolls. I passed a wooden support beam with names carved into it. Jacob, Ben, Ellie, Thomas. And beneath those, scratched deeper than the others, he watches from below. I turned the corner into the main chamber of the basement, and the smell hit me, sweet and putrid, like dead flowers soaked in mildew. The room was vast, too vast. It made no sense. It extended beyond the footprint of the house. Stone walls lined with what looked like moldy insulation, but felt more like rotted hair when I brushed against it by accident. Then I saw him, a boy, no more than 5 or 6, standing at the center of the room, back turned to me, dressed in clothes decades old, suspenders, muddy socks, a frayed collared shirt. His head hung low. His hands trembled at his sides. "Jacob?" I called out. He didn't move. I stepped closer. Jacob, I read your mother's journal. I saw the grave. He lifted his head, but didn't turn. Then, in a voice far too deep to belong to a child, he said, She locked me in, but you opened the door. So now you'll stay. He turned, and I knew instantly it wasn't Jacob. The eyes were wrong, black as tar, gleaming like glass marbles. The mouth stretched unnaturally, lips split at the corners. The skin was pallid, almost translucent, but flickering, like static. Every few seconds, the boy's face shifted. One moment Jacob, the next, Thomas, then Eleanor, then someone else entirely. Me. I backed away. But the floor beneath me cracked. The stone gave out suddenly, revealing a pit. I caught the edge just in time, fingers grasping broken rock. My flashlight tumbled into the blackness and vanished without a sound. I dangled there, heart in my throat, and looked down. No bottom. Just darkness. A darkness that moved. Shapes writhed below, impossible shapes, as though the earth beneath the Lambert House was not filled with dirt, but with memory. And not human memory. Something older. Hungrier. Then Jacob, or whatever wore his face, leaned down above me. You're part of the house now, he whispered. You always were. And with no expression at all, he let go of my hand. I fell, but I didn't land. I woke up, in the bed upstairs, drenched in sweat. Morning sunlight streamed through the cracks in the blinds. The air was still. My clothes were different, clean, unworn. The dust was gone from the furniture. The house looked new, restored. I sat up, heart pounding. Was it a dream? The room smelled of lilacs. Downstairs, I heard clinking dishes. Footsteps. A voice, warm, familiar. Breakfast is ready. I froze. That voice. I knew it. I walked down the stairs slowly, gripping the banister. Everything looked different now, brighter, lighter. The wallpaper was fresh. The piano shined. The family photo on the wall was whole again. Everyone smiling, including me. In the kitchen stood a woman, my mother, but not as I remembered her in her final years. Younger, strong, wearing a blue dress I remembered from a photo she kept in a box labeled 1972. She turned to me and smiled. You look tired. Did you sleep okay? I opened my mouth, but no words came. Was I dreaming? Was I dead? Before I could ask, I saw movement behind her. In the reflection of the microwave door, a tall figure standing in the hallway, watching us both, its face hidden in shadow, but familiar. It wore my face again. I blinked, and the reflection was gone, but the feeling remained. The house was quiet, too quiet. And somewhere, deep below the floorboards, I thought I heard the distant sound of a music box playing Ring Around the Rosie. The kitchen was impossibly bright, washed in the warm morning light that filtered softly through lace curtains. The scent of fresh bread and brewed coffee hung in the air, comforting and familiar, but beneath it was something darker, something not quite right. I stood frozen, staring at the woman who smiled at me across the room. She was younger than the mother I had known in my memories, her eyes shining with a vitality I hadn't seen in years. You look tired, she said, voice gentle, almost too perfect. You should sit down. Eat something. My throat was dry, words stuck inside me like shards. I took a tentative step forward, and the floor creaked under my foot. A sound so out of place in this pristine scene it shattered the illusion for a moment. I glanced at the hallway behind her, and in the reflection of the polished countertop, I saw it. A tall figure standing silently, its face hidden in shadows. It was watching us, unmoving, but the feeling it radiated was sharp and cold. I blinked, and the figure vanished. "Who's that?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. She turned, confused. "Who?" "The man in the hallway. There was someone there." She shook her head, dismissing my concern with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're still tired. Maybe you need to rest more." The unease settled in my chest like a stone, heavy and unmoving. I swallowed hard and forced myself to sit at the table. As I reached for a piece of toast, I noticed a small, folded piece of paper taped to the underside of the table. I pulled it out carefully. The handwriting was jagged and hurried, but unmistakably familiar. It read, "You're already part of this house. You always have been. The family is waiting." My heart pounded harder. I folded the note and shoved it into my pocket, trying to push away the creeping dread that threatened to consume me. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from upstairs. The woman glanced toward the ceiling as if hearing something I could not. "I'll be right back," she said softly, and disappeared through the door leading to the hallway. Left alone, I stared around the kitchen, searching for answers in the immaculate surroundings. The house looked restored, yet the air was thick with something ancient, something that pulsed with life beneath the surface. I rose and moved toward the hallway where she had gone, the floor beneath me groaning with each step. At the top of the stairs, I noticed something strange. Where the wall should have been, a faint shimmer hovered, like a heat haze or a veil. I reached out tentatively, and my fingers brushed against it, passing through to something cold and dark. I pulled back, breath hitching. Then I heard it, a whisper, low and urgent, coming from beyond that veil. "Don't trust the light. It hides what the dark reveals." Suddenly, the shimmer rippled and faded, revealing a narrow corridor that hadn't been there moments before. The walls were lined with old photographs, faded, torn at the edges, but unmistakably the Lambert family. Their faces smiled back, but as I scanned them, I realized something chilling. The faces shifted and blurred, morphing subtly into mine. The corridor led to a small room, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. Inside, a table was set with photographs and scattered papers, diaries, letters, and sketches. I recognized some handwriting. It was my mother's. I began to read a letter addressed to me. "If you're reading this, it means you've found the house. The truth you seek is buried deeper than the stones and memories. The Lambert House is alive, a vessel for those who came before, and those yet to come. You are the key, but also the lock. Beware the face that wears yours, for it hides what's truly inside." The words chilled me to the bone. As I folded the letter, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the bulb and plunging me into darkness. In the silence, I heard it again, the child's laugh, twisted and haunting, echoing from below. Then a voice, distant but clear, "Welcome back." I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight just in time to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was the boy from the basement, his face shifting between Jacob, Thomas, and the shadowed figure that wore my face. His eyes locked on mine, filled with sorrow and malice. "Your story isn't over," he whispered. "It's only just beginning." And with that, the room seemed to fold in on itself, the walls breathing and closing the space around me. I braced myself for whatever lay ahead, knowing that the Lambert house was no longer just a place. It was a prison, a mirror, and a reflection of everything I feared about myself. The next step was mine to take. The room seemed to close in tighter with every breath I took, the walls pulsing faintly like a heartbeat, throbbing in time with my own. The shifting face of the boy stared, unblinking, from the shadows, his eyes like bottomless wells pulling me into some darkness deeper than any night. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat, strangled by fear and confusion. Around us, The faint echoes of children's laughter and whispered voices spiraled, growing louder and more frantic, as if the house itself were alive, watching, waiting, hungry. The flickering beam of my phone's flashlight barely pierced the gloom, but it revealed more than I wanted to see. The floor beneath us was cracked and uneven, veins of shadow twisting like roots across the stone. Behind the boy, vague forms seemed to rise from the darkness. Twisted figures half seen, made of smoke and sorrow, trapped souls or memories that refused to rest. The air was thick and cold, smelling faintly of damp earth and old secrets. I stepped back slowly, heart pounding in my ears. The boy's face twisted in a grimace, shifting once more, cycling through the faces of the Lambert family, but always settling back on one, mine. His voice echoed softly, low and mournful. "You can't leave. This is where you belong. Just like us." My mind reeled, trying to make sense of the impossible. Was I trapped in some nightmare? Had the house consumed me, swallowed me whole, and taken on my likeness? The lines between past and present blurred, my memories tangled with the fragmented stories of the Lamberts. I saw flashes, a mother's desperate journal entries, a child's broken toys, a family photo slowly altering to include me as one of them. Suddenly, a distant creak broke through the voices, drawing my attention to the far side of the room. There, faintly illuminated by the flashlight's failing glow, was a door. Old, wooden, scarred with time, half open and beckoning. The crying resumed, softer now, fragile, a whispered plea that pulled me forward despite every instinct screaming to run. I crossed the uneven floor, each step heavy, as if the shadows themselves clung to my feet. The closer I got, the more the air changed, thickening until I felt it pressing against my skin. The door swung wider as I approached, revealing a narrow, spiraling staircase descending further into the unknown depths beneath the house. A cold draft rose up, carrying with it the scent of earth and decay, and the faintest touch of something sweet, almost floral, but long dead. The boy's voice echoed after me. "Down here, the truth waits." I hesitated on the threshold, flashlight trembling in my hand, then stepped into the darkness below. The stairs groaned under my weight, winding down endlessly into blackness that swallowed the light whole. As I descended, the sounds of the house faded away, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed on my chest. The walls closed in, damp and cold, slick with something that might have been water, or something else. At the bottom, I found myself in a cavernous space unlike anything I'd expected. The basement expanded far beyond the footprint of the house, a labyrinth of stone and shadow, punctuated by strange symbols carved into the walls. The air vibrated with an ancient power, humming low and deep like the growl of a slumbering beast. In the center of the chamber stood an altar, draped in dark cloth and littered with relics, broken toys, rusted keys, and faded photographs, many of which bore the faces of the Lambert family, and, chillingly, some with my own face etched faintly on the edges. A soft glow emanated from a crack in the stone floor, and from it, whispers rose. Fragments of forgotten memories, half-remembered promises, and warnings. I stepped closer to the altar, my skin prickling as the whispers grew louder. One word stood out among the rest. "Remember." Then a hand grasped my shoulder. I spun around, heart racing, but no one was there. Only shadows. The air thickened again, and the whispers turned to voices, sorrowful, angry, pleading. "You're one of us. You can't escape. The house knows you." Panic surged through me. I stumbled backward, nearly knocking over the altar, and the glow flared brighter, revealing the outlines of something beneath the cracked stone, an opening, a pit yawning into endless black. I couldn't see the bottom. A voice echoed from the depths, cold and ancient. "Come home." Fear rooted me to the spot, but a strange pull, deeper than reason, compelled me forward. I knelt at the edge and peered into the abyss. The shadows writhed and twisted, forming shapes both human and inhuman. Faces emerged and vanished in the darkness. The Lambert family, distorted and broken, trapped between worlds. A sudden movement caught my eye. From the darkness climbed the boy with the shifting face, reaching out a pale hand toward me. "Stay with us," he whispered. The weight of the house pressed down on me, and in that moment, I understood. The Lambert House was not just a place of haunted memories or restless spirits. It was a living prison, a nexus where past and present collided, and I was entwined in its eternal cycle. I pulled back, scrambling away, heart pounding, but the shadows reached out, whispering promises and threats that echoed in my mind. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the vision shattered. I woke in my car, parked by the edge of Calvert Falls. Dawn was breaking, pale and gray, the town still asleep. My hands gripped the steering wheel, sweaty and trembling. The Lambert House stood behind me, silent and still, its windows dark. But I knew. It wasn't over. The house had marked me. The family had claimed me. And somewhere deep inside, I could still hear the faint strains of that music box, playing Ring Around the Rosie, calling me back. The fog clung to the ground like a living thing, thick and suffocating, as I sat behind the wheel of my car staring back at the Lambert house. The daylight was weak, struggling to pry through the gray sky, and every inch of that decrepit mansion seemed to pulse with a life that refused to die. I wanted to leave, to drive away and forget the house, the voices, the shifting faces, the abyss beneath its floorboards, but something deep inside held me captive, like invisible chains wound tight around my chest. I turned off the engine, stepping out onto the cold, damp earth. The air smelled of moss and rot, of forgotten things buried and never buried. The gate to the property hung open, creaking softly as if beckoning me to return. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I crossed the threshold and walked toward the house, the gravel crunching beneath my boots like a death march. The front door was shut tight, freshly painted black with no sign of the scratches or message I had seen before. I raised my hand, hesitating, then grasped the cold doorknob. The moment my fingers touched it, a jolt of icy fire shot up my arm. I pulled away, gasping. "Welcome home," a voice whispered behind me. I spun around but saw no one. The wind whispered through the dead trees, carrying with it the faintest echo of children's laughter, twisted and broken. Swallowing hard, I stepped inside. The house was changed again. The walls glowed with a faint golden light, the peeling wallpaper restored to floral patterns that swayed gently as if breathing. The piano in the corner gleamed like new, and the air smelled faintly of lilacs and old wood. It was as if the house had swallowed time and spat out a perfect memory, a memory that wasn't mine, but somehow felt like it. I moved cautiously through the rooms, every creak and shadow setting my nerves on edge. On the wall hung the photograph, the Lambert family smiling, serene, and me, standing among them, face calm and familiar. The house felt welcoming yet oppressive, like a beautiful cage. I found the staircase leading to the basement. The door was there, closed, unyielding. No padlock this time, just the heavy weight of silence pressing against it. A low hum vibrated from below, calling to me. I grasped the handle and pulled. The door swung open with a groan, revealing the black maw of the stairs. The air inside was thick and cold, smelling of earth and something darker, decay, sorrow, and secrets long buried. My flashlight flickered as I descended, and the shadows seemed to stretch and curl, reaching out like grasping fingers. At the bottom, the cavernous basement sprawled before me, a labyrinth of stone and darkness. The altar stood at the center, draped in black cloth, scattered with relics of the past. broken toys, rusted keys, and faded photographs. The air pulsed with a low, rhythmic vibration, like the heartbeat of the house itself. Suddenly, from the far corner, the shifting-faced boy emerged. His eyes glimmered with a mixture of sadness and malice. "You came back," he said softly. "You belong here now." I clenched my fists, fighting the despair that threatened to overwhelm me. "No," I whispered. "I'm not yours." He smiled, a sad, twisted thing that made the shadows writhe around him. "You always were." The walls began to close in, the air growing thick with whispers and cries. Faces appeared in the stone. Jacob, Benjamin, Eleanor, Thomas, and mine, all trapped in eternal torment. The altar's glow intensified, revealing a hidden staircase spiraling down into deeper darkness. "The heart of the house," the boy whispered, "where the truth sleeps." I hesitated, then descended. The darkness embraced me, cold and absolute. The whispers grew louder, voices overlapping in a cacophony of sorrow and warning. At the bottom, I found a room carved from the earth, walls covered in ancient symbols, and faded murals depicting a family bound by blood and shadow. In the center, a well of darkness pulsed with energy, an endless void that seemed to draw me in. A voice echoed from the depths. "Join us!" I felt a hand on my shoulder. Turning, I saw my mother's face, serene and sorrowful. "Remember who you are," she said. "Remember the love that binds us." The void reached out, promising release, oblivion, and belonging. I closed my eyes, torn between surrender and escape. Then, with a surge of will, I stepped back, breaking the spell. The darkness recoiled, and the room brightened. The voices softened to whispers, then silence. I climbed the stairs, emerging into the basement once more. The altar was bare, the relics gone. The house was quiet, for now. I stepped outside into the dawn light. The fog had lifted, revealing the town of Calvert Falls bathed in soft gold. But as I turned to leave, a faint melody drifted on the breeze, the fragile strains of a music box playing ring around the rosy. The Lambert House was waiting, and I knew, in my bones, that it always would be. If you've made it this far into the depths of the Lambert House's story, thank you for stepping inside and facing its shadows with me. This house isn't just bricks and mortar. It's a mirror reflecting the darkest corners of family, memory, and the things we try to forget. Its secrets linger long after you leave the front door behind, and the echoes of its past can reach into your own life in ways you never expect. If you want to keep exploring true mysteries like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Have you ever felt something unexplainable in an old house? Or come across a secret that shouldn't be uncovered? Let me know your stories, because sometimes the scariest tales are the ones we don't tell. Until next time, be careful what doors you open and what faces you trust.